First off,
Well, I'm the Reverend Alec Pueschel, and I am running for Congress in District 6. I am doing this, well, let me give you a little bit of my background, and then we'll get into some of the other. Professionally, I'm a pastor, Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. I'm also a retired law enforcement officer, Prince George's County, Maryland. I'm also a commercial pilot, still have my license. I'm still also certificated as a flight instructor. So that's some of my professional background. And if you want to go back, I also served in the U.S. Air Force Reserve, but that's a long time ago, like during the Vietnam era. So that's older than most people here. But you too, huh?
no sir, you're right there with all of them.
So I've been around the bushes for a little bit of time and served in a variety of different ways. Now the thing that I also like to bring in is I'm very happily married to my wife, Deborah. Actually, Deborah's also running for Congress in District 4. That's an interesting fact for you. That you will not see that too very often. But her name is Deborah. Middle name she still keeps handy is Katz, K-A-T-Z. So you might like that. Oh, and Deborah is the biblical spelling, D-E-B-O-R-A-H. So I came to this part of Florida 15 years ago, called as a pastor in Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Jacksonville. I actually served as a vicar in Spring Hill, Florida, which is over in Hernando County. For those of you who may not know where that's at, that's about 40 miles north of Tampa, Brooksville. So I was retired from the church this year, in January this year, so it's been in the back of my mind to get re-involved in the political scene. When you're a pastor, you kind of shy away from it. But my background before going into the ministry was actually, I was involved in politics. I actually at one point ran for the sheriff of Prince George's County, a Republican. I think I put that in the bio there. So yeah, I do have some background. The Republican Party was recruiting me for a number of things in Prince George's County. But Prince George's County at the time, and still is, very heavily Democratic and very difficult for a Republican to get elected. So I came in second, let's put it that way. So I've always had a finger on political activities, an interest in the Constitution of the United States, the laws. Actually, my interest in the laws goes back all the way to, I guess, first years in college, which was up in Maryland. And that's how I actually ended up getting to work for the FBI for a few years before I went to the county police department. I was just taking courses and I got interested in law. And then I got particularly interested in law enforcement. I was taking business courses in law. And that's when I said, business law is pretty interesting. But then I started looking at the criminal law and I said, this is even better. So there was an opportunity to get to work for the FBI and I said, I'll take that. And that's how I ended up getting into law enforcement. And I've always had kind of a mind for civics, I guess you could say. So I ended up doing that and enjoyed that tremendously. And I never have left an interest in, if you want, politics and civics, and interest in the Constitution of the United States. And so that's, after I retired from the police department, and I was still doing commercial aviation, flight instruction, on the side, besides being the president of my congregation up there, I was also politically active with the Republican Party in Prince George's County, Maryland. And when I was there, I really started getting interested. And they actually asked me if I'd be the one who runs for the sheriff up there. They didn't have to worry about primaries up there. They just said, there's no opposition, you're in. So that was pretty simple. But like I say, I came in second, unfortunately. So I was really starting to look very closely at going back, get a degree in law. And it's when I started looking at that, and I also was very interested in the gospel of Jesus Christ, that I kind of had to go into a real prayer about it and say, Lord, where do you want me to go? And that was one of those epiphany moments. And yeah, I took the LSAT test, and I was kind of picky about the school I wanted to go to. And they said, you really probably ought to go back and study for another year in policy. And I said, I don't really want to. But it goes back to my prayer, which said, if the door doesn't open, see if this door will open. So then I took the what is it for your master's, the exam, and boom, aced that thing. And I'd been out of college for a few years, so getting back into it at age 47 was kind of a fun thing to do. And, I aced that score and ended up going to the seminary at Fort Wayne, Indiana. And then 4 years later, got my master's of divinity, and that's how I ended up coming here. My keen interest is still the Constitution of the United States. I still firmly believe that the United States needs to return to following its Constitution, its Declaration of Independence. The Founding Fathers, when you study the history of it, we were certainly a country that was founded upon a very limited federal government. And that's one of the keys I have in this whole campaign, is that we need to get back to the liberty and the freedom that our Founding Fathers envisioned for us, with a limited government at the federal level. They did not like tyranny of government. They obviously experienced that firsthand with the British motherland, or the King George III at the time. And so I think that they were right on target with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, that we should have a very limited central government. That way, that keeps us free. Obviously, along the way, the government has built up to the point where now it controls almost every tenet of our lives. I disagree with that. I think we need to have a rollback. Listening to the case that came out from the Supreme Court today on, as it's commonly known as Obamacare, I think it's a terrible decision. I think that decisions like that go against the Constitution, regardless of what the justices may think. Obviously, it's a 5-4 split decision. You can see that they're not unanimous on this by any means. But what I see is, again, when the government can dictate to you what you must buy, that's not freedom. It takes my freedom away, my freedom to choose that, no, I don't want that particular product. It takes away, again, our liberties, I think, that have been established for us. So that's one of my main concerns. I see that as the country has lost more and more of its freedoms with over-regulation, with that comes the overtaxation. I want to get away from the income tax. I think the 13th Amendment should be repealed, or, 13th, 17th Amendment. We have one of those moments. But anyways, the income tax amendment, I think, should be repealed, and that we go to the fair tax. I like the idea of a consumption tax. That way, whatever you earn, you keep. Whatever you spend, then that can be taxed. So I'm very much in favor of a consumption tax. I think that the energy policies, again, with overregulation, I think with the EPA dictating so much of what we must do and what we can't do, we still have a loss of freedom. And again, I will focus in on that freedom issue, that liberty issue. I think we can be a lot freer if we let business do what business needs to do without encumbering them with so many regulations that they can't even conduct business, let alone even for a small businessman trying to get a startup. You know, even at the local level, that's not easy. But then you throw in the OSHA rules and the EPA rules and everything else that the federal government throws at you. It's amazing that a small businessman can even get going, without jumping through all the hoops that he must go through. I see down the road the dangers, and you talk about your First Amendment rights. Now you believe very strongly, I'm sure, in freedom of speech, freedom of the press. I do too. But I see down the road where the government can say such things as, some of the recent decisions that are coming out when a man supposedly was arrested because he said something to Vice President Cheney. Well, aren't we stretching it a little bit if a man speaks his mind to the Vice President of the United States and he gets arrested for it? There goes your freedom. When the government can sit there and say, well, you can't say this. If the man's asking certain questions of the Vice President, okay, Mr. Vice President, you don't have to answer them, I know that. But we don't have to have the Secret Service coming in and arresting the man. If he's not posing any kind of threat other than, hey, I don't like those kind of questions, and I see that's the road that we are going down, and I don't like it.
Did you ever find out what he actually said to him? That was so offensive?
I think what happened is they finally said, well, it wasn't the speech anymore the issue, it's that he touched him. Now, I've got a problem with that because in my law enforcement days, touching somebody, only in the broadest terms can you construe that to be assault. Because how many times when you're speaking to somebody do you just kind of reach out and, hey, John. To me, you got to go back to what's the intent? And I don't see intent there of committing any crime other than I'm trying to get the man's attention. So I think we have to be very careful when we start to give the government too much power, because then power given to the government is something they take away from you. And whether that's the freedom of your speech, your freedom of your press, pretty soon they're going to tell you what you can write and what you can't write. And that's where it can go. We don't think it can happen in this country, but I can see where it can. And I want to protect and safeguard those sort of things. I think I've already repeated this on the economy. I see the fair tax helping it, the getting rid of the overregulation of the government, the unnecessary involvement of the government in every aspect of our lives. The debt has to be taken down. We cannot continue every year increasing the national debt. You just can't do it because it's just like just saying, well, I've got this credit card and I just increase my debt. Well, you can't do that forever. The old Pied Piper is going to come home and the rats are going to come back. And you can't just sit there and say, well, let's just increase the debt so we don't shut down the government. Well, guys, you better start finding ways to economize the government, because otherwise the debt indebtedness, or the indebtedness that we have, that will shut it down eventually, and that you're going to have such hyperinflation that everything that you own is not going to be worth a nickel. The dollar today is not worth what it used to be.
How do you feel about the war? I mean, you're in being Congress, you'd have to make decisions about whether to stay, go, Commander-in-chief isn't everything.
No, I know. I'd like to see a declaration of war. I mean, I think if you're gonna fight a war, you fight to win and close up shop and come back home. I don't think if you got an enemy out there, though, that you're still fighting, that you want to tell him, hey, I'm leaving you on December 31st, by the way, and goodbye. You want to crush your enemy, make him come to the table, and do whatever is necessary to get him to talk to you and negotiate a settlement. And if he doesn't, then you've got to defeat him just as much as we did Germany and Japan. And what are they today? They're our allies. But I don't like the idea of the way we fight wars today. You know, I know some of you lived through the Vietnam era. I certainly did, and I didn't like the way we fought that war. I didn't like the one that when I was a real youngster. You know, the Korean War. My dad was active duty back at that time. In fact, my father was active duty during all the wars. You go to his gravesite in Arlington, and it'll say World War II, Korean, and Vietnam. So he saw the time all throughout that.
What service was he?
Air Force. That's how I got that way. I couldn't resist going Air Force. But
What about energy? You have any strong feelings on the energy policy? It looks like Obama once signed a lot of the pipeline.
yeah, I firmly believe that, to me, if you got a loaf of bread in the cupboard, why are you starving outside when it's over there? Just go get it. In other words, what I'm trying to say in that analogy is, if we need it, we need it. Do we still want to proceed with other energy resources and research? Absolutely. You know, I don't want to sit there forever trying to say that oil is going to be the only resource that we can use. I think there's other resources. But if oil is what the primary driving mechanism of our economy is now, go for it. Get that, gasoline at the pump down to where it was, 4 years ago, $1.87 a gallon. If you do that, think about it in this terms. The reduction in transportation costs for any business out there. Just that alone. That's a savings that man or woman, whoever's running that business, that CEO, then they consider, well, we're not going to have to lay off people. We can actually start to hire people because our transportation of getting product A out to the consumer is less. So we can start to, invest in ourselves as far as our business and expand. But as long as you got a high cost of transportation, it's not going to happen. They've got to worry too much about where is the cost of this going to go. And if it keeps going up, it's going to be counterproductive to business. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, sir. I've been hitting you a lot of issues in a row, but now I'm thinking, how are you on the war on drugs? I mean, there's not much of a transition going on. It's been the same old thing year after year.
Yeah, I know.
Costing us millions of dollars and not having any effect. Do you have any radical feelings on that, or are you just...
Radical?
What I mean, would you want to change up the way things are going, or you think it's good where we are?
I don't like where it's at. I mean, I think that's a hard one. When I was a police officer, going back to the 70s even in the 60s, I went in law enforcement, back in the 60s actually. But it gets to the point where law enforcement doesn't have time, and I didn't even have time back then, to deal with the small-time petty user. Most of the time, you would just give them a warning and set them on their way. You end up, the only thing that you can go for is the person who is, dealing with the big drugs. Is drugs a problem in our country? You bet it is. I've only seen one program in my law enforcement career that I ever thought was very successful in actually rehabilitating. and people don't really like to touch it, and it's a voluntary system. It's something under Teen Challenge. Now, Teen Challenge deals with a lot of the spiritual aspect, and that's why a lot of the states, well, it's not, I don't know, have you heard about Teen Challenge down here? Yeah. There is actually there used to be up in Jacksonville, but I know up in Prince George's County, Maryland, we had a very good unit up there, the Teen Challenge, where they bring in the individual, and I mean, they smother them with love, and care, and concern. And that's what a lot of these individuals really need to change their lifestyle, to understand that there is somebody that cares about them, and that it's not hopeless, that there is something besides getting smoked out of your mind forever. Mm-hmm. And that was a very successful. I remember, because I was in dealing with some of the counselors there. They were telling me that their success rate for people who finished the program was somewhere in the 80th percentile, which is excellent. Now, obviously, people can drop out. They can say, "I don't want any of that stuff. That's too much Jesus talk," and obviously they're going to have, because it has to do with the gospel of Christ. It has to do with a loving person, and the counselors are very charismatic in the sense of their outreach to these people. But it's very successful. Those who get through it, like I said, when you're in the 80th percentile of success, that's pretty good. The next best program that we ever had, and I forget if it's going back a bunch of years, by the way, was around 10 or 11%. I think it was one of the state programs. And that's not very good. That means you're still losing 90% of the people. So, is there an answer for you? I don't think maybe necessarily at the federal level, other than keep the drugs out of the country, protect the borders. I mean, shut the borders down, lock, stock, and barrel, whatever we got to do, put a big fence up, stop the drugs from coming into our country. That's the federal responsibility.
That leads me to go into immigration.
I guess it does.
Yeah.
But I
Stop
do.
the drugs, stop the.
But I do believe that you have to stop the drug infiltration into the country. As far now, the homegrown stuff, I see that as a state responsibility. That is something that really is the response. Other than if you can pick it up that it's interstate, then it's a federal responsibility. But primarily, law enforcement at that time becomes a local responsibility.
So like California legalizes, but the federal government now still enforces it in California because it's a federal law. But you'd say you take away that protection from, you take away that enforcement in California because the state would legalize it if Florida did.
I have a problem a lot of times with some of the duplication of federal laws and state laws.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the immigration thing. I was disappointed with the Supreme Court decision with Arizona recently on the immigration issue. I think that Arizona, when they're a sovereign state, and as a sovereign state, they have a right to protect their citizens. Mm-hmm. We, as a sovereign state of Florida, have a right to protect our citizens if the federal government's not doing it. And what I see is many times right now that the federal government is not fulfilling its obligations as far as shutting down drug trafficking, especially the trafficking are coming into our country. And we do know that there's a lot that's coming from Mexico. There's some that comes from Canada, but Mexico is they've got tunnels going underneath the border. I don't know if you're aware of that. I mean, there's things that go on that people just,
do you support or oppose the DREAM Act? Senator Rubio has been talking about softening the rhetoric on immigration and trying to come up with some compromise DREAM Act. Do you favor or oppose the DREAM Act?
I will oppose it the way it is, and let me explain why I think. And since we're on the immigration,
Mm-hmm.
illegal immigration is illegal no matter how you want to cut it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a legal way of coming into our country. I can give you an example. My wife's family, South Africa, they wanted to immigrate into the United States. Took over 9, almost 10 years for them to do it legally. Why should I give other people the shortcut? It's not fair to the person who waited in the line and waited and waited, and now they say, well, we don't want to divide families up. But when and they're about third cousins, when they came to the United States, they had to leave their 21-year-old son behind because he was now an adult. See, they applied when he was about 12 years old, and they applied as a family. But now that he's 21, well, he can't make it because he's an adult. So yeah, we can break up that family, but they did the right thing. They waited in the line to come to the United States. I think if you're illegal, it's illegal, and it's not a good step to make friends in the United States. So, short answer, no.
Former Governor Bush has urged the Republican Party to soften, if you will, in his words, the rhetoric on immigration. Do you agree with him on that?
No.
No? Okay.
I mean, you can soften the rhetoric, but we need to deal with it, and I think if he means by softening it, that we're just going to sweep it under the carpet and not talk about it, it needs to be on the plate. We have, in this country, I think they admit to at least 12 million, but that is one of those areas I would say that if the government says 12, I would easily double it. And in just talking with other people out there, I would guess probably more like 30 million is probably more accurate. And I think that we need to discuss it because in that immigration, not only people who want to work, but we've got Americans, citizens that need work right now. Now, I have no problem if you want to set up in Mexico or some other place where we have a need for work, you have a work permit. I mean, if you're in Ireland and you can get a work permit visa to come to the United States, fine, if there's that special need that we have. But it is strictly limited. You come in on a permit and you exit. You know, when I go into South Africa, for example, I'm there on a 6-month visa, and I better be out of there. In fact, there's countries I've been in that said, well, wait a minute, you're 1 day past. And they kind of, well, okay, because you were late getting out. It was not intentional. It was one of those, we couldn't get to the airport in time. So I don't see where, we need to be very much controlling our borders, controlling the immigration, and we need to deal with it. And I don't think we have. I think we've been very slack in it. Both parties have. I don't think both, it's, and I hate to say it, but to me, it's just politics trying to get a particular voting block.
Okay. Let me change the subject. Have you signed or will you sign a no tax pledge?
Oh, yeah.
You will?
Yeah, and no taxes.
Former Governor Bush's argument about that is that if you sign that, you're not at the table negotiating with the other side to get a good deal. How do you respond to that?
I think we're overtaxed. I think and that was one of my original premises. You can't keep taxing the people if they're already, going, I mean, how much more can you tax the people?
But that wasn't the issue Governor Bush is raising. Governor Bush is raising the argument you you can't be in negotiation with the other side if you've already cut out one of the options. So he said basically, people who sign the pledge are not going to be at the table making the deals. How do you respond to that?
Well, I still say no taxes. I go back to George Bush, first president, George Bush. And he said, read my lips, no more taxes. And I'll say, read my lips, no more taxes, and I mean it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he broke that pledge. And I think he was wrong to do that. And I don't think it's, I just disagree with him on it. It's just one of those things that I don't see I don't think it's time. You can always negotiate, but you need to negotiate the other direction. Because to me, if I negotiate, if I say, yeah, we can put taxes on the table, what are you going to take off the table? Did I move too much?
No, it's fine. Let me change the subject. You know that the Supreme Court ruled today in healthcare. The Republican mantra has been repeal and replace. And if you're elected, I assume that you'd be in that camp. What would you replace it with? Or would you seek to replace it with?
I would not seek to replace with anything. I don't think that the government has any business in your health care or your health insurance.
Okay, so if you were elected to Congress, what would you advocate?
I would advocate keeping the government out of my health business. That's between me and my insurance company and my doctor.
Okay, what about Medicare?
You know, I'm stuck on Medicare, and I don't particularly like it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put it this way. With Medicare, I look at things in the long term. We've gotten ourselves into a mess with Medicare, Medicaid, and everything else. I would like to see maybe 50 years down the road. You know, Medicare is only 50 years old. In 1965, actually, it's 47 years old. Yeah, 47 years old. I think people forget that I remember the arguments still for Medicare back then. I don't think people really remember. I mean, there was the arguments back then that, no, the government shouldn't be doing this. Of course, it passed anyhow, but now look at it. It was something that was said to be, oh, it's only going to cost this much. You know, this little bit. That's all it's going to cost us. Well, now look at the system. It's costing us an arm and a leg. And I don't know about you, but when I switched over to Medicare, I did not get as much coverage as I had when I had my own insurance before that. I actually lost. And now with my other insurance company as a secondary, they're always arguing, well, Medicare only pays this much, and this is the only approved amount, and you've got to go back and forth, and I don't know if you have to deal with it, but back and forth with insurance companies to try to get them to pay, you know, the balance, because Medicare is not very good at it. It's not a good system. I would like maybe 50 years down the road, I think we got into this mess slowly but surely until it's up over our ears. And I think we need to start looking at ways to extricate the government from the business of the healthcare business.
You mentioned earlier in your introduction debt. I assume you would have voted against raising the debt ceiling.
That's correct.
Let's talk about earmarks. Are you favor them or oppose them?
I'm not in favor.
We have in St. Augustine two things that come to mind that were funded through earmarks. One is the construction of a new seawall, and the other is the Council on Aging building. These are beautiful things, or one's a necessary thing, and another's a beautiful thing. If you were elected to Congress and similar projects like that came around, and if you assume that they had value, how would you fund them?
I have a problem with some of the earmarks, and now some of them, people call some things earmarks and some things are not called earmarks, and that's where I think that we get into the argument on well, what's an earmark and what's not an earmark. Mm-hmm. I think things that are to me, in fact, I'm going to go meet Flagler Beach because they've got a seawall problem down there, and they don't like what the government's doing. And I see the government has a certain responsibility in where I see the responsibility is that highways are a government responsibility. And I think seacoast highways in particular are a government responsibility. And the reason for that is national defense. I see that you have to protect your borders again, and that includes your seacoast. You have to have evacuation for your people. So those are the kind of exceptions, and you want to call those earmarks. I don't like to call them earmarks. I think that's just common sense. Things that you have to do for your infrastructure to keep it sound, and for your national defense to keep it sound. So I look at earmarks as when you have a bridge that goes no place, and it's a waste of money.
Well, yes, and people are quick to point out that the people who had that bridge lived on the other side, did not see that as a bridge to nowhere.
Yeah, I know.
They saw that as a necessity. So one person's earmark is another person's necessity.
Although there weren't that many people living on that little island.
Yeah. You don't live in the county.
No, I don't.
And you don't live in the district, rather.
No.
How do you answer I assume you've been asked the carpetbagger question. How do you respond to that?
Well, I don't think of myself as a carpetbagger. I actually do a lot of business here in St. Johns County. Now that I'm retired from Holy Cross, I actually attend church here in St. Johns County. Healthcare providers are down here. We often come down here to eat. So we do a lot of our personal business here in the county. And that's pretty common. So I think I can still represent the people regardless of my actual place of sleeping. So,
if you're elected, will you move into the district?
actually, my wife and I have considered, because we're thinking about selling the house that we're in and going to a beachside condominium. So we're actually thinking about it because we're both saying, I'm getting tired of maintaining a house. Wouldn't it be just nice to be at the beach and not have to worry about a house? So it is something we have thought about.
Your wife's running in another district.
Yeah, isn't that
You're
nice?
both elected, what happens?
Well, we both go to Washington at the same time.
Yeah, where would you live? One of you have to live out of the district.
Well,
Either that or get a divorce. I mean, that's
we don't do that. That would be harsh. I mean, obviously, we'll cross that bridge, but right now we do have the house we do have. So, by the way, it is okay under federal law and state law that you can live I can actually live up here and have the district on the other side of the state. In case you're not aware of that, it's just the way the law is written. But I do have a lot of ties down this way.
Would you favor or oppose raising the Social Security age as a way to help make it more, to help extend the solvency of the program?
There's a lot of things that we need to do with Social Security. And it's another one of those things that I would like to put on the 50-year plan of let's get that money back to the people. For right now, I want to, and this is the same with Medicare, by the way, I'll make this very clear. People who are in it, they've put their money into it, they've got the promises of the government, and those promises need to be kept, fulfilled. So the people that are like you and me, and we're in the Medicare or the Social Security era, I've been paying in since I was 1962 into Social Security. So, by the way, as a public servant, and this is just a little aside, I know I changed gears on you. I do not get full Social Security. Y'all aware of that, right? Yeah. A lot of people who are not aware that when you've already been serving in the public arena, like I did in law enforcement, because I have a pension from that system, it's offset. So that's not a great advantage of having Social Security for me. Although I've got 40 quarters, fully vested into it, I still can never receive the full amount. But I want to make it very clear, and that's why I say I reiterate, because a lot of people, when they hear you want to modify Medicare, you want to modify Social Security, yeah, I do, because I'm looking at the future generations, a long time after I'm gone out of this world, that there needs to be something better than Social Security. I think it's a crime that 15% of your income, and that's the way I look at it. I was self-employed for a while when I was teaching aviation. And that's 15% that has to go off the top right to the government. And I always said, I can do better than that. And I could. So long term, I would like to see us start to wean ourselves off of Social Security, off of Medicare, and start getting us back into looking at things where you are responsible. You pick the system that you want. Maybe for right now, we'll give people the option of, let's say that, okay, if you can put yourself into whether it's a 401 or a IRA account or something like that where you can develop that. And I'll give you the great example is my wife's family. When my father-in-law died at age 57, he was a pretty young guy actually. He'd been working in Social Security, paying into it for 40 years. My mother-in-law at that time, and we weren't married just yet, but she could not collect the Social Security. She was a federal employee, so she couldn't collect anything. The only thing that was collected was there was one boy that was still 14 and a half years of age until he graduated from high school. She could collect a small amount, and that was it. So she got some Social Security for him, but that's it. And she could not collect, and she died at age 62. And so you could see where all that Social Security, all that money that he accumulated over all those years, there was no feedback when you really think about it.
So let me see if I'm hearing you correctly. What you're saying is not for the people who are now
You've got to safeguard those people that are in the system.
But let's just say I'm 21. So what would you do for me if I was 21?
I think that where we start with you as a 21-year-old is start giving options.
Mm-hmm.
You can option out of Social Security and go into a private system that you have control over. That way, when you turn 62 years of age or whatever the arbitrary age, if you do an actuarial study on this, and when I was at Cambridge University, I was showing someone, I said, look, I can show you how you can become a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just do the IRA thing. And you can set any percentage into that IRA. If you're an aggressive type of individual, you may want to have a higher percentage. If you're not aggressive, you may want to, and back then, moderate was 4 to 5%. In the 90s, you still had some good percentages like 10%. So I say you can do the math on this, that after 40 years, well, after about 35, actually the exponential curve starts to climb like a rocket. If you ever do the math on it, you just sit there and go, and he said, I couldn't believe it. He says, it kind of flatlined, came up slowly, 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 and then I hit about the 35th or the 40th year, and then it just started to take off. I said, yeah. Now you put 40 years of your labor into it. When you turn 65, and that's 25 to 65, I said, guess what? If you put any kind of money into this thing, you're a millionaire. My design is to make everybody millionaires.
The average savings of a boomer is about $60,000. So it's a sign either that they aren't able to save, or can't save, or don't save, or won't save. But no one can retire on $60,000 a year. And that's what the average boomer is, because they go from the late 40s to the 66. So what does that mean? How does that work with your philosophy? If all these people have had this lifetime to save and haven't done it?
I think part of it's going to be education.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the failures of the school system is not educating the children in certainly in the areas of business, fiscal management. I mean, if you've got parents that can't educate you in fiscal management, you know, fortunately I had parents who said, if you save a nickel and a dime, you know, eventually it adds up. I think if you have parents that can't do that or won't do that, then maybe in the school system we ought to start looking at, you know, at least giving some kind of studies towards letting these kids know before you graduate. And I'm talking about in high schools. Before you graduate, you will understand how the free enterprise system is supposed to work and how you can invest and you can make money by your investments. Whether it's a 5% or if you want to put $10 away a week or however you want to do it, how that can be turned around. Some kids are going to pick up on it, some are too lazy to do anything, and you know, it's just too bad. But at least I bet there'll be a percentage that would say, you know, that thing makes sense.
You say it's just too bad, is that like getting a whole generation just saying, you're lucky kids?
Well, I think it's too bad because there's too many people, too many kids who, you know, they're going to just go out and party no matter what it is, and that's a shame. It's a waste of their life, a waste of the talent that they've been given and the knowledge that they have. That's what's too bad. They waste themselves.
Okay.
I wanted to ask about, you started out, and I thought you were going in a further direction down, highways, seacoast, responsibility of federal tax dollars, federal government.
Yeah,
But beyond that, what about education? What about the general health care to the very poorest? A lot of children don't have insurance, and you know, what about social issues? How much should the federal government be in there?
I think it's a local issue. I don't think the education, for example, you want me to
Yeah.
tell you, I'll tell you, the Department of Education should be closed. I think that the local government, the parent, first of all, has the primary responsibility for education. The government at the local level, your school board, the state, would keep the federal government out of it. They do not know, and neither, I mean, I didn't like One Child Left Behind. I just don't like any interference from the federal level. The kids here in Florida or in St. Johns County, they will have needs that are going to be different than kids in the state of Washington or the city of Washington. It is just different geographical areas, different types of population. That government that controls best is always the local government. That's the one that's closest to the people. And if you keep the federal government out of it, to me, that's money that is best used at the local level. And that's the short answer for you.
Yeah. Should the federal government subsidize local government?
No, keep the federal government from taking the money in the first place, because all that they'll do is they're going to get their GS-15s and 16s and senior executive service people, high-paid jobs, and what are they going to be doing? Oh, well, let's see if we can dole this. Oh, wait a minute, St. Johns County, we don't like the way they're doing things down there. We're going to put a string on that they do it our way. Anytime you take money from the federal government, there's strings attached. You don't need strings attached. You need to have control of your local issues. Now, I think as far as the federal government, if there's a national emergency sort of situation, yes, they can step in with some type of emergency aid, but otherwise it's their responsibilities. In fact, I was looking at one of the questionnaires I received, and looking at it, and I'm going, again, responsibilities that have been, let's give everything to Washington. We can't give everything to Washington. They don't have the best answers for what goes on in this district. They just don't. The churches traditionally used to be one of the places that people used to go. In fact, I used to serve on the board for Lutheran Social Services. And I know that we distributed food galore everywhere. Get the churches, wake up call. Lutheran Social Services has done a lot in this area. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those are the kind of things, and Catholic Charities. There's a lot of churches that do a lot of things that, but there's been, I know over the years that some of the restrictions have been out there too, that, they get kind of reticent about getting involved in some of these things anymore. And then that's where I think certainly some of those organizations can really step up and with the volunteers, and it doesn't cost, again, all this tax money that we have to have for it. So I'd like to put the responsibility back into the community, the individuals, and in the churches.
Let me ask a question, and then we'll give you a chance to close it out, honoring your time. A lot of what I read from you and a lot of what I read from the other candidates for this position, there's some similarities. How do you separate yourself from the remaining Republican candidates? And why would I vote? Why should I vote for you? Why should the constituency support you?
Well, I really think that with my background, which is a little bit different than most of the others, I've been a public servant for almost 20 years in law enforcement, and then I've been a public servant also in being a pastor. So I've had the opportunity to hear people in a very personal way, and I think that's the one thing I bring to the table is that the ability to listen to people and hear them and understand what their needs are. But I also bring to the table, I think, a good understanding of constitutional limits, the limits on federal government and the responsibilities that the government at that level and the government at the state level, that they should be delineated a lot better than what they are, instead of being so crossed up that people don't know where they're going. But those are some of the things I think I bring to the table that, with my background being, one of the life of service, actually. And that's one of my themes in this whole thing, is that I've always served.
I'll ask you one last question. That was the last question.
The next last question.
Next to last.
I've listened to you for this almost hour. You sound more like a libertarian than a Republican.
Some people say that.
Yeah.
That was going to be one of my questions, was where you rank yourself. Go ahead, Pete.
So am I correct? You sound more like a libertarian than a Republican. So why are you running the Republican?
I am a constitutional Republican, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask one?
Go right ahead.
Oh, absolutely.
Another last question?
The next last one.
The third last question.
Yeah, your opponents have different professions here and are known. One's here in St. Johns County, he's an educator.
Yeah.
There's some down from Flagler, and they have jobs. And I would like to know, how do you identify your constituency? I mean, you have a vague knowledge of St. Johns County, maybe the.
Well, I know geographically. I know that professionally, I've been in the different professions. I've been in aviation. I've been in the social services work. I've been in the congregational work. I've been in the law enforcement work. So
those are your qualifications. I mean, what do you see as people that?
But you got to understand, with those qualifications, there comes a knowledge of those type of professions.
That's right.
And those people who are in those professions. So those are the things that also counts.
You can relate to those professions.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you have a next to last list? Do you have an organization in this county?
Do I have an organization in this
Yes.
county? No, I do not.
Okay. Do you have
I am running on a shoestring right now, if that's what you want to know.
Cool.
I'm done.
All right, sir. You have the last comments. Really.
Oh. Yes, I do believe in strict interpretation of the Constitution. I think that one of my favorite presidents, besides George Washington, is Thomas Jefferson. He gave so much insight into limited government. I think that it's kind of strange. I know the Democratic Party always claims he was the first Democrat, and maybe rightfully so, but it seems to me that go back and read what Thomas Jefferson had to say. I enjoy reading, some of the early presidents. In fact, when I was in the seminary, I studied the first 3 presidents. I wanted to see what they had to say. And Thomas Jefferson certainly was our 3rd president. I like the ideas of our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence. I like the idea that there is a federally, limited federal government. And I still see that as one of those things that we have strayed far from. And I don't know if that makes me a libertarian, but I really think that I am just what you would call a strict constitutionalist. And I like to call myself still a Republican, but a constitutional Republican. One who believes in liberty and freedom, and one who says that if we continue down the road that we're going, that we're going to be losing more liberties, more freedoms. And I have a fear for that. I have talked with many people, including in this district, things about what they see. I've talked to Cuban Americans in particular, and they said when they lived under Fidel Castro, they saw him coming in and all these wonderful promises. And I still remember those days of Batista. And we were all going, yeah, get that bum out of there. And then they ended up with Fidel Castro, and nobody knew what to think, because he wasn't supposed to be like this. He was supposed to be this democratic ideal, and all of a sudden it was upside down. And I don't want to see our country go upside down into such a situation. It wouldn't go as fast as that because we have greater safeguards, but it can happen. I think of other countries. Now, my name, I told you, is very German, and I look at the people of Germany, after Bismarck, trying to become a republic, and then after the war, trying to hold on to a republic, and then they ended up with a guy called Hitler. And I'm sad that these German people, as bright as they are, intellectually brilliant people, and what do? They fall for the guy's lies. And that's what I'm afraid of, that people vote in more government because they just think, oh, well, he's promised us everything there is and can't deliver, and end up taking away your liberties. I'm very much in favor of liberty and freedom. And I think I've already mentioned to you that I think when you get liberty and freedom, it gives you also free enterprise, frees up the economy so it can produce, gives a businessman the opportunity to think clearly without having to wonder, am I obeying this regulation or that regulation? You have to hire people just to take care of the regulations. That's where we've been, and that's where we're even getting deeper and deeper, and we don't need to do that. We can do better as a country, and we can take individual responsibility rather than just pushing it off and saying, well, let the government do it.
Max, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
today.